Hello, this is Boyd Gray doing Workshop 7 in a series of 10 workshops on researching your family history in Ireland. Now, in previous workshops we have looked at land records for the 19th century. We've looked at censuses of 1901 and 1911, and then we've talked about using the Griffiths Valuation Revision books in order to link up those land surveys, the last one being in 1850, the 1850s, with the censuses of 1901. However, there's a much better and much more important way of linking them up, and that is using births, marriages and deaths. BMDs we often refer to them as, and BMDs are the bread and butter of genealogy. That's what most of us use most of the time in order to find out who our ancestors were. And I call them BMDs because they are births, marriages and deaths, but they can also be baptisms, marriages and burials. And the two different sets of names illustrates the fact that there are two distinct sources. Births, marriages and deaths come from civil records. Baptisms, marriages and burials come from church records. In this workshop we want to have a quick look at both, and in particular what we want to emphasise is what you're likely to find in any of those 6 types of records, so that you will know what you can look for in the online databases, which we'll cover in the next workshop. So, starting then with civil births, marriages and deaths. Civil births, marriages and deaths began in 1864 in Ireland for everybody, with one exception. Protestant marriages began in 1845. So you will find records of births, marriages and deaths from 1864 for everybody, and Protestant marriages from 1845. And these will be very, very useful to you. But we want to have a look at some of them and see what information they contain, because they are very different from American ones, or indeed from Scottish ones. Unfortunately, the Irish ones aren't quite as good, but they're what we have, so we make the best of them. So, this is a civil record of a death, and there are certain things that I want to highlight in this. The most important thing of all is that this man, William Mackay, was from New Buildings. I knew that when I was looking for him. He was from a place called New Buildings. But if I were to look for him under New Buildings, I wouldn't find him. Where do I look for him at all? Well, all civil births, marriages and deaths, civil births, marriages and deaths, have an index which is on microfilm in the General Registry offices in Belfast and in Dublin and in many family history centres, and indeed online, as we shall see later. So you're looking for these people in an index. What the index will give you is their name, and it'll give you where they came from. But if you look for the townland where they came from, in this case New Building, you won't find them. You need to know what they are listed under, and they're listed under the registration district, basically the place where the event was registered. In this case, the registration district, superintendent registrar's district, was Ballymoney, and the sub-district was Durra. So that's what I will be looking for when I'm looking at the index or searching for it online. William Mackay of New Buildings will be found under Ballymoney or Durra. Most important thing about a death certificate, and this is a death certificate. What else is in it? Well, there's the date he died, there's where he was living when he died. Don't forget that no hospitals in those days, so although we find William Mackay in New Building, we might have had to look for him in a nearby townland. He might have given a nearby townland address because he might have moved in with a daughter, daughter-in-law, niece, something like that when he became elderly. Male, widower, important piece of information, tells you for the first time this man was married twice. Age 50, always be very suspicious of an age in round numbers. People probably were asked, what age was he when he died? Oh, I don't know, he was about 50, so they write down 50. Could also, of course, have been enhancing his age before he died, and he might actually be over 60, for all we know. This man was a police pensioner. That's what he died of. Not a great genealogical interest, but always fascinating. This next box has the other extremely useful piece of information on a death certificate. This is the PAD box, present at death. Who was there when this man died? Who can say that it was this man and go along and register the death? In this case, it gives the name of James Boyd. About 50% of the time it will tell you who James Boyd was. In this case it doesn't. It tells you that he was from Marykeel. I had a strong suspicion that one of William Mackay's daughters was married to James Boyd. This confirmed it. James Boyd was his son-in-law. That's the most important information from a death certificate, a civil death certificate. Moving on, this is a civil marriage certificate. And again, although these people were from Culmore and Nishegan, you're not going to find them on the index to civil marriages under either of those places. You have to look under the place where they were registered, and in this case it's Reshargan. They're going to be registered in Reshargan. What information is in this one? Again, there's the date. There's the name of the two people who got married, Thomas Bellingham, Georgina Mackay. Of full age means they were over 21. Sometimes it gives the actual age, but more often than not it just says of full age, which isn't awfully helpful. If it's under 21 it will say minor, always supposing the people were telling the truth, of course. Just as now in those days, some people wanted to get married before they were of full age, before they had permission of their parents, so they told little lies about their age and pretended they were of full age. Or, even more common, it was not unusual for an elderly farmer to pretend that he was 30 when he might have been actually 40 or 45. There's the occupations of the two people. Usually the woman doesn't have any. There's where they were from. And then, most important information of all on the certificate perhaps is the name of the fathers of the two people who are getting married. This will push you back another generation. If these two people are your great-grandparents, these two names here are your great-great-grandparents. Notice, no space for mothers. If you search a database putting in a mother's name for someone, you won't find it. The database will tell you, sorry, never heard of that person. That doesn't mean the record's there. It just means you have asked the wrong question. You always need to ask the right information. Also on a marriage certificate, we have down here below the signatures of the two people and two witnesses, Francis Bellingham, Letitia Boyd. Very often these people were brothers and sisters, so it's more clues for you. If they weren't brothers and sisters, I know in this case one was a brother, the other was a cousin. Looking then at a civil birth certificate. This is taken from a register, and you can see a list of civil births going down the page. But once more, let me emphasise, no matter what the townland, you're looking for the registration district on the index of civil births. In this case, it's Coleraine or Auchnacloy. Probably Coleraine, but possibly Auchnacloy. It depends on who has taken the information and which they decide to use. Looking then at what information is available, if we move down to number 3 here, it gives you the date, it gives you where the person was born, very useful information if you're wanting to identify it as your person. Name, Martha Ann, female, daughter of John Boyd of Cross Canley, and then this is the gold dust in a civil registration certificate. It gives the name of the mother and it gives her maiden name. So all of a sudden you have a new great-grandparent to look for if this is your grandparents are here. So for example, Margaret Boyd Anderson was her maiden name, so you're looking for the Anderson family. Mr. Anderson will be your next generation. The rest of the information isn't overly useful, although it may help to identify that you have the right person. It says schoolmaster there, and over here it says who registered the birth, and it's usually the father. Sometimes you get an extra piece of information, it'll be a sister or an aunt or something. So those are civil births, marriages and deaths, available from 1864, except for Protestant marriages, was 1845. That doesn't take you back very far, although of course if you find someone dying aged mid-70s in 1864, it takes you back into the 18th century. But in order to go back a little bit further, you need church records. I need to say at this point that church records will not go back, in Irish churches anyway, much further than 1800. And even then, it's really only Church of Ireland church records go back to 1800. Presbyterian ones, about 1830. Catholic ones, about 1850. That's not to say that you won't get a Catholic church that has records going back to, I found one once going back to the 1770s. That gave me 2 extra generations for that family. Absolutely brilliant. But usually about 1850. However, you also should remember that up until civil registration in 1864, it was actually the law that everybody should have been registered in a Church of Ireland church. So you will find Presbyterians and Catholics in Church of Ireland church registers of baptisms, marriages and burials. I want to look at them now because there's no standard format for them. It depended entirely on the clergyman, on the minister or the priest, what gets written down. Sometimes they're absolutely brilliant, really well kept, very neat and tidy and full of information. Other times you get very, very little out of them at all. So let's have a look at some examples of baptisms first of all. Right, I'm actually going to start with deaths first of all. This is a page from the Register of Taboyne Parish Church, and it shows a burial. It shows a series of burials. This is the first page, so they begin in 1819. Now, if somebody's dying in 1819, aged 70 or something like that, that's taking you back very, very early. But all the information it gives is the date of the burial and the name. No townland, so not awfully useful. This is an example of a baptismal register, and again it's Taboyne Parish Church in Donegal, and this is one of the best registers of baptisms that I have ever found because it's meticulously kept. And you can see here that in the first column is the date of the baptism. The second column is the date of birth. Now, very, very often in church registers you'll only get the date of the baptism, not the date of the birth, and sometimes they can be quite far apart. Very often only a few days apart because so many children died young, they baptised them very quickly. But I have known one of my ancestors was 6 years before he was baptised. So it's important to have the date of birth if possible. Then there's the name, then there's the parents, and in this case the clergyman gave the maiden name of the mother. Extremely useful. Pushes you back another generation. Gives where they were from, Tullyrap. Gives the profession of the father. Again, it can be very useful in identifying. It says Mason here. So that particular church register of baptisms is extremely useful. Unfortunately, they're not all as useful as that. Look at this one, for example. This is baptismal register. I think it's from McCuskun, an early one from McCuskun Parish Church. This time, what does it show you? Baptized, the name of the child, Thomas Cochrane, for example. There's the date as well, but it's just the date of the baptism. Over here, it gives John and Mary Cochrane. No maiden name for Mary, but at least it does give the crucial piece of information of where they were from, so that you know it's your John and Mary Cochrane that you're looking at. It can get worse than that, unfortunately. Here is one, another church register, and if we make it a little bit bigger, we might see it a little bit better. Parents' names. You see, it was entirely up to the individual clergyman what he wrote. He's written Thomas and Eliza Adams. No maiden name, not very useful. Child's name John Adams. At least he gave the date they were born and the date they were baptized. However, not a lot more information, and most crucial piece of information missing is the townland. We don't really know if this was the people we're looking for or not, especially if they had very common names. So that leaves marriage registers. Marriage registers again can be very varied. It depends what the clergyman wanted to write down. However, for some reason that I've never really understood, after 1845 and 1864 in Catholic churches, they do tend to use the actual civil registration form. They must have been given the books to the churches, and they fill them out so that you do get some very useful information in church registers after 1845 for Protestants, 1864 for Catholics. But of course you would get the same information, or very nearly the same information anyway, in the civil registration, because it's the same form, although you'd be quite surprised how much difference there sometimes is between them. People change their names about what the child, or what they were called in between times. So there we have civil and church BMDs, I shall call them. Now, if you have found this workshop useful and you want other people to benefit from it, can I suggest that you look down below here, look down below where you're watching this on YouTube, and you click like, because the more people who like it, the more it is going to become, it's going to rise up the list in YouTube, and more people are going to be able to find it. Better still, if you subscribe to it, that gives even more hits and gives even more credit to these videos, and more people will therefore see them. Not only that, but if you subscribe to it, when we do more videos, as we will do in the future, you will be personally informed that a new video has become available. Which reminds me, one final point. If you have any questions on any of these videos, these workshops that we have done, again, write the question down below. That question will come to me, and we will look at those questions and do another video answering specific questions, whichever are the most common questions, at a later date. And if you subscribe to it, you will get that an announcement of that video.